Okay, so today we're going to cover the beginning of division, and when you divide fractions, we're going to learn in the next section that we're going to multiply a fraction by its reciprocal. And essentially what a reciprocal is just a fraction flipped upside down. So for example, when you multiply a number with its reciprocal, its product is always going to be 1. So here, when they try to multiply 5 with its reciprocal, if we try to multiply 5 over 1 times 1 over 5, we get 5 over 5, or 1 over 1 if we simplify on the diagonals, giving us a 1. So again, a reciprocal is just a fraction flipped upside down. Now, sometimes you may be given the numbers as decimals, and then you'll have to make them into fractions so that you can see that they're reciprocals of each other. Remember that 0 has no reciprocal because 0 times any number is 0 and it's not 1. Again, sometimes you're going to see the symbol for reciprocal written like 1 over a, where if they're asking you for the reciprocal of a. And then again, every number has a reciprocal except 0. So here's the official property, and it just basically states that for every real number, there's actually a reciprocal except 0. So again, if they give you a whole number and they ask you to give the reciprocal of it, you're going to flip it upside down. You could make a whole number into a fraction by adding 1 to the denominator and then flipping it upside down to get its reciprocal. Also remember, if you have a mixed number, everybody know how to make a mixed number improper? Okay, so if I asked you to give the reciprocal of a mixed number, you're not just going to flip the 1 over 4. You need to make it improper first. So we would multiply 4 times 2 and then add 1. And then we would get 9, and we keep the same denominator. So we would first have to make the mixed number improper and then flip it upside down to get its reciprocal. The other property on this page is the property of the reciprocal of the opposite of a number. So again, technically it's looking like it's a negative number, but this book will read it as the opposite of a is equal to the same thing. So you just flip it upside down. We don't make the sign opposite. So if our number starts out as a -5, the reciprocal of -5, or the opposite of 5, would be 1 over 5, and it's negative. So that's all that property there is stating. Again, they read negative numbers as the opposite. Then here, the property of the reciprocal of a product. All this is stating is the reciprocal of the product of two non-zeros is the product of their reciprocals. So again, if you had two numbers that you were multiplying to find their reciprocal, again, you would just flip it upside down. So let's say it's 1 times 3 like that, or even in parentheses. We could break it apart, say it's 1/2 times 1/3, and then that product would be 1/6, and then its reciprocal, you'd flip it upside down or say that it's 6. So it's basically the same thing. We're still going to just multiply. All right, let's try example 1. Here it's not asking for a reciprocal or anything. It's just asking us to multiply these two fractions. So when you multiply fractions, remember we're going to multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. Also remember, a positive times a negative is a negative. So here I'm going to do 1 times 1 and 4 times -7 and get -1/28. Remember that when you have negative fractions, if the negative sign is in the top of the fraction or in the bottom, oops, let me highlight there, or out front, all three of these fractions mean the same thing. So whether it's on the denominator, on the numerator, or out in front of the whole fraction, all of those mean the same value. Remember that if you end up with a fraction and there's a negative number in the top and a negative number in the bottom, we're going to learn that a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so we would always simplify this to positive 1/28. Pretty good on that? Okay, so let's try part B. Again, we're just going to multiply. Again, I can take my 4y, make it a fraction by adding a 1 to the denominator, and then I'm going to multiply. Now, when I multiply fractions, I like to simplify before I multiply. It definitely makes my problem a lot simpler. You could go ahead and multiply straight across, but I'm going to simplify the 4's and make them 1's. And now I'm left with 1 times 1, y, and 1 times 1, giving me just y. Now, if you don't simplify diagonally, then you would have gotten this. And then gotten 4y over 4, and then you'd have to reduce it at this point. Make it 1, and then it's 1y over 1, and it's just y. Either way, it definitely will simplify your problems if you can do that cross simplification. And then let's try part C. It's -6ab. I'm going to turn it into a fraction by adding a 1, and then I'm multiplying that by -1/3. Notice I'm multiplying a negative times a negative, so I'm going to get a positive, and then I'm going to simplify my diagonals. Make this a 1, make this a 2. So now I'm just going to be left with -2ab times -1, which gives me +2ab. The denominator is 1 times 1. I don't really need to show it because anything divided by 1 is itself. So here, even though we're being introduced to what a reciprocal is, essentially all of the homework problems are going to be multiplication problems. So let's go ahead and first let's see if we can state reciprocals. So we have the whole number 7. What is going to be the reciprocal for the whole number 7? 1/7. Okay? Because remember, you can add 1 to originally and then flip it upside down. What about the reciprocal for -1? Good. Okay, what's the reciprocal for number 6 there, the 3/4? Okay, 4/3. Okay, what about number 7? 4. Because 0.25, remember we can make it a fraction. This is 25 hundredths, and then simplify it to 1/4, and then its reciprocal is 4. And then number 8, what's that reciprocal? -8. The sign doesn't change, we just flip it upside down. Okay, number 9, what's its reciprocal? Good. And then number 12, what's that reciprocal? And this little, right here, this s is not equal to 0. That's just saying that we can never have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction because it's undefined. But essentially, all we're trying to figure out is what's the reciprocal of this? Yes? -s. So this really doesn't affect the answer. They just want us to let us know that if we were to give S a number, it can be anything except 0. Okay, so next slide is your homework. So your homework is 1 through 34 all. Again, as you notice, most of these are all multiplication. They're really not asking you to find any reciprocals here. But a lot of them use something similar to a reciprocal. So again, I highly recommend that when you're doing these, you try to simplify diagonally. It'll make your problem a little bit easier. But again, you don't need to, but it definitely helps. Any questions on the reciprocal?